Good evening. We'll see. Good evening. The time of the meeting having arrived, I would like to call this meeting to order. The sign-up sheet for tonight's meeting is outside the room, and the agenda is going to be a bit different than we've had it in the past. We will be having public comment at the top of the meeting, followed by discussion from the Community Development Department, and then discussion by the City Council. The call of the meeting is as follows. The Housing Committee shall meet to continue discussions on the Affordable Housing Overlay District and other related matters. Good evening. Tonight, the Housing Committee is meeting to continue our discussion on the proposed Affordable Housing Overlay District. We have now had numerous meetings, all televised, devoted to reviewing and deliberating upon this topic. The Community Development Department has provided the overview of what we hope to achieve with this proposed overlay district, and they have walked us through proposed language for this. I understand this evening they plan on giving us an update on some tweaks that they've made to the proposed ordinance, and I will say up front that at this point in the discussion, my strong feeling is that the ordinance committee, being a committee of the whole, would be the most appropriate place to hold further discussions going forward. I want to note right at the top of the hearing that tonight marks a somber occasion. A somber occasion for this committee, for the Cambridge community, and for me personally. 2 days ago, Cheryl Ann Pizzazioli passed away after a long illness. She was a member of the Cambridge Affordable Housing Trust, a co-founder of the Alliance of Cambridge Tenants, a walking encyclopedia regarding housing policies, and someone who would work tooth and nail and did this for decades to increase the amount of affordable housing in this community. Let's just pause for a moment of silence. Thank you. These past few months, she knew she didn't have much time left. And she still continued to attend these meetings and hearings until she was no longer physically able. And when she wasn't able to leave her bed, she still would furiously send us emails with her comments, her observations, her analysis, passing this on to the members of the Housing Committee, passing it on to the Affordable Housing Trust, because she truly cared about what kind of community she would be leaving behind. Her commitment to engaging in this discussion up until the very end speaks to what courageous, compassionate person she was. We have left an empty place at this table tonight in her honor, and it's a vacancy that truly shall never be filled. I know Cheryl Ann would never forgive me if I didn't use this somber moment to reflect upon some of the fundamental points she repeatedly stressed to us at the past hearings. The time is precious and fleeting, and sometimes in these heated public discussions, we're in danger of losing the forest for the trees. She often says that when we have these discussions about affordable housing policy, at the end of the day, we really have to remember we're talking about people. We really have to remember that Cambridge is not a community of neighborhoods. Cambridge is a neighborhood. We have to remember we're talking about people and we're talking about families. We're talking about finding ways to be more welcoming to people. We're talking about some of us possibly making some concessions to provide new opportunities for the less affluent to remain an important part of our community. Yes, we are talking about people. I very much hope that the echoes of Cheryl Ann's words continue to resonate and guide us as this discussion continues. In the interest of being respectful of people's time tonight, we're going to have public comment immediately after the co-chairs, Council Sumbel and I, give our open remarks so that people who wish to leave after they have spoken will be free to do so. After public comment, we'll hear an update from CDD, and then we'll open the floor to general discussion among the committee members. Again, it's my strong feeling that this Housing Committee has taken this discussion to the point that it would be most appropriate to vote it out of committee and send it on to the Ordinance Committee to begin hearings on the proposed overlay. If that does happen, I wish to assure all of you that there will be ample opportunity to further weigh in on this progress, digest the material, and I hope reach consensus. I will ask my Housing Co-Chair, Council Sumbel Siddiqui, to provide her opening remarks. We will then go into public comment and will be followed by the CDD and then discussion among the council. With that, I yield the floor to my co-chair.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Just a few quick points. So the staff has come back with some new additions and changes, although I do wish we had seen these earlier and had time to review prior to today, prior to yesterday, and for the public. I'm still not convinced that that would have left fewer questions unanswered. And more importantly, this is an evolving process. And we still have a lot of specifics to review and details to clarify. And I'm hopeful that in continuing to moving the conversation forward, we will arrive at a place where we have a clearer understanding of this proposal's implications. And we also have a City Council order that was voted by all of us that the Vice Mayor brought that said the goals of the proposed zoning overlay are commendable and more information is needed to fully inform the council and members of the public on the potential implications of adopting such a zoning overlay. So we are still, there will be a response coming forward to that, but I point out that there's no adopting of zoning tonight. There will be a lot of public input before we even get to that point. So there, as my co-chair said, there will be much more time to weigh in on some of the critical pieces we still have remaining questions about. I know that staff are developing graphical illustrations on how the affordable housing overlay requirements will be applied to various sizes and types of sites. So with that said, this is an evolving conversation, and so tonight we will hear about these changes, and more importantly, we'll also hear from you as we've done in this process. So with that, I'm going to move to open public comment. I know that people are still signing in. And we had a few, how many communications? Many communications that were received, and they're over here if you'd like to see them. And
Madam Co-Chair, just to add,
sure.
The Deputy Clerk, when you make your comments, please leave them and they'll be made part of the record. If you email your comments, they have to be emailed before midnight tonight in order to be a part of this record. Thank you.
And there is a sign-in sheet if you haven't signed up, so make sure to do that, and we'll run around and collect it. So we'll hear from Elizabeth Capaccio first, followed by Francis Sullivan, followed by Justin Gee. And you will have 2 minutes. And please state your name and address for the record. And just use the mic. Thanks. Just turn it on, the green button right there.
Today's the 25th.
Did it work?
Great.
Hello. Okay. Lisa Camacho, 24 Corporal Burns Road. Neighborhood 9, where I live, isn't as densely populated as other parts of Cambridge. Density and number of affordable units are not the only ways to contribute to the diversity and vibrancy of the city. Former city officials turned Neighborhood 9, once the city's dump area, into a citywide resource, so high school students and residents now have practice fields, picnic areas, outdoor concert venues, a place for hazardous waste collection days, dog park, Little League fields, adult soccer games where I hear players speaking mostly Spanish and Portuguese. There are downsides to living near citywide resources, even ones that are beautiful open space. Increased traffic from out-of-town teams when they come to be defeated by our Falcons at Danahue Soccer Field. Non-residents parking in front of our houses when Watertown, Lexington, etc. plays our Little League teams. Booming music from park loudspeakers during city festival and permitted events. With the 100% overlay, Cambridge is working to solve a problem that is not ours alone. Fresh Pond Parkway is a reminder that Cambridge already suffers a local problem created by what was originally meant to accommodate the entire region. If the Alewife parking garage had been built near 128 as proposed, we wouldn't have a day-long traffic jam inching through Cambridge. We certainly wouldn't have the war room of housing, little of it affordable, offices and hotels built on our floodplain because they can be advertised as being near mass transit. As I said, Cambridge is working to solve a problem that is not ours alone. Once upon a time, we could possibly have solved it self-sufficiently, but not now. Today, one of my neighbors works in Brookline, another in Lexington. My husband and I worked in Framingham. I only hope that part of developing affordable housing for Cambridge includes reaching out to other cities and towns in the area. I'm sure they are aware that the problem of affordable housing will eventually arrive on their doorsteps as well, and their numbers are much less than Cambridge's. Thank you very much.
Francis Sullivan, followed by Justin Gee, followed by Charles Franklin.
Hi, I'm Frances Sullivan. I live at 6 Laurel Street, and I don't have any written remarks. I just wanted to speak informally to say that one of the reasons I have chosen to live here for the past 9 years and raise my young family here is because I absolutely cherish the diversity of Cambridge, and I cherish the Black Lives Matter, you are welcome here signs everywhere, and I want to raise my family in that kind of environment. I think we kind of have to put our money where our mouth is when it comes to new affordable housing and making that more available. As far as I can tell from the previous meetings I've been to and some comments online, some of the biggest concerns are about height and setback. And I am as sympathetic as the next person to the quality of life afforded by sunlight and trees. So that's great. However, if I'm going to lose a little bit of sunlight because a bigger house is going to go in next door, that's a disappointment I would gladly shoulder for the sake of more families living in my neighborhood. I don't think it's an equal trade-off. I also hear a critique that the overlay will not actually result in more housing, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think it will. But more than that, something is better than nothing. Any effort that is made is a good effort. Finally, when friends and family come to visit me here in Cambridge, they all remark on the architectural diversity and the kind of combination of houses in my neighborhood, and I always reply happily, yes, that is what diversity looks like. That is what integration looks like. So I don't really see kind of architectural unity as a major concern here. I think we've been intermixed neighborhood, and I love it. So I encourage you to support the overlay, and I support it myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Justin Gee, followed by Charles Franklin, followed by Teresa Cardosi.
Hi, my name is Justin G. I live at 9 Austin Park, and I just wanted to comment on all this process that has been going on. I haven't actually seen anything concrete. And as the Housing Committee, you can do something concrete and take one of your projects, such as Main and Cherry Street, which you are very proud of, and imagine what it would look like under this new overlay. It would be larger, it would be harder to permit. And you've been successful in the past, and I don't doubt that you can be successful in the future without this overlay. So I'm just going to put that out here. Thank you.
Thank you. Charles Franklin, followed by Teresa Cardosi, followed by Robert Camacho.
Good afternoon. I have spoken here many times about the overlay proposal and my concerns with it as written. I appreciate the changes made to the draft that was released yesterday, but I still don't believe they address my greatest concern, housing equality. To me, part of housing equality means being able to be part of a neighborhood, not just in it, particularly without the things other neighbors have to maintain a good quality of life. This will not be found in a micro unit. I've created my own affordable housing overlay. I met with homeowners, renters, Section 8 voucher holders, and the CDD in the creation of this plan. Two very strong supporters of the CDD overlay said they take my plan right now without the parking requirements beyond ADA compliance. But enough about the details. I want to talk about the discourse. Over the past 2 months, the vitriol in this room and on social media has come to a breaking point. I will not tolerate baseless personal attacks and public shaming, nor should anyone else. Just last night, a West Cambridge resident discovered that their Wikipedia page had been vandalized to a point of borderline libel. If we burn bridges now, it will be harder to work together on other needed solutions in the future. I learned this the hard way during the Inman Square reconstruction debates. If we're going to help our friends and neighbors, we must return to civility. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you please leave your comments if you have them? Thanks. Teresa, followed by Robert Camacho, followed by Fred Meyer.
Oops. Hi, my name is Teresa Cardosi. I live at Woodrow Wilson Court, 7 Woodrow Wilson Court in Cambridge. I'm asking that you please support the 100% affordable housing overlay. Much land and property in Cambridge is already bought by the for-profit entities or people that can afford to buy it. So the nonprofit organizations and people without the highest of incomes, they can't purchase or rent in Cambridge. The 100% affordable housing overlay is an opportunity to help keep Cambridge's population diversified by allowing people of all income levels to live here. Nonprofit housing simply cannot compete with the developers unless this 100% affordable housing overlay is passed. So please promote the equality in Cambridge by supporting the overlay. Allow Cambridge to strengthen community ties by intermingling affordable housing in all areas of Cambridge. And I ask that proponents and opponents of the affordable housing overlay go to the CDD website, to the new revised April 24th, 2019 frequently asked questions, because they clarify a lot of the areas of concern and they decipher between facts and inaccuracies. And I think once people get the real facts, they can make better decisions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Teresa. Followed by Robert Camacho, followed by Fred Meyer, followed by Deborah Rue.
My name is Robert Camacho. I live on Corporal Burns Road in Cambridge. I am not against affordable housing plan that takes a common sense approach to non-residents who wish to live in Cambridge. But in my opinion, the affordable housing overlay is not that plan. The overlay plan of doing away with all current zoning that has been established over the decades that I've been here is extremely undemocratic to all the neighborhoods affected, and it's the equivalent of trying to fix a stopwatch with a sledgehammer. Current Cambridge residents have purchased properties knowing what the zoning and context of their neighborhood is. This has been a long understood concept of property ownership in the United States, but now the affordable housing overlay proponents want Cambridge residents to agree to a plan that is completely different. The fact that many people want to live in a particular place may be a crisis for them individually, but that doesn't make it a crisis for the community in which they want to live. I would love to live in New York City, but I can't afford it. That may make it a crisis for me, but not necessarily for New York City. I do believe, however, that this overlay plan will create a housing crisis for those of us who already live here. I believe the housing developers wrote this overlay plan based on their needs. If the zoning authority overlay is passed, will the city be granting public funds to these developers? Also, my understanding is that the city even wants to extend that opportunity to any developer that agrees to build affordable housing. Has anyone seen a plan from these developers in Cambridge? And will these plans be made public? Finally, I'm not against affordable housing, but I am against a plan that takes a sledgehammer to all current zoning before we, who already live here, know what's going to go up next door. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Fred Meyer, followed by Maureen. Want to confirm Maureen does not want to speak. Followed by Alexandra Markowitz, followed by Teresa Camacho.
I can't believe I heard that Fred Meyer didn't want to speak. I'm sure a lot of people would like to hear that. 83 Hammond Street. The problem we're all trying to solve together is the rapid increase in rents here, which is simply caused by ever-increasing demands from high-salaried workers moving in, resulting in thousands of tenants displaced and thousands on the city's affordable housing list. But those who think a zoning proposal is the answer have admitted that no more than 100 units a year would be built under this zoning. But that's obviously just a tiny drop in a big bucket of need. A simpler and faster answer: let's start subsidizing rents directly, immediately. Let's set up a Cambridge Rent Scholarship Fund based on merit and need, run just like state college scholarships by independent admissions officers, not politicians, or just by who happen to sign up first on a really hidden waiting list. Let's increase your affordable housing budget, and I salute you for having increased it already, but increase it by 20% more for 2020, and keep doing that every year. 20% of your already planned 20 million equals 4 million. Divide that by 12 months. Divide that by, say, $2,000 a month for an average rent subsidy. That equals 166 worthy families a year help. Do the math yourself. And they get to keep renting. They get that place to rent immediately. They don't have to wait for long new construction. And add a new Cambridge second mortgage home ownership fund, which would be self-financed after initial.
Thank you, Fred. If you have, please leave your comments. I want to confirm Maureen from 411 Franklin does not want to speak. Okay. Alexander Markovitz, followed by Teresa, followed by Teresa from 95 Raymond Street, followed by Stephen Kaiser.
Hi, thank you. Alexandra Markievich, 6 Laurel Street. Thank you, councilors. I urge you to support the affordable housing overlay and swiftly move it into the ordinance committee. Over the past month and a half, you've heard from many residents all over the city who have told you why they care about affordable housing. These people have shared their personal stories about how affordable housing has brought stability to their families and opened up new opportunities. We've learned about how critical affordable housing is to ensuring a thriving, vibrant community with economic diversity, a place that cares about equity, which is how we typically define ourselves in Cambridge. We've also heard from people who fear the changes that the affordable housing overlay will bring and who fear the impacts of loosening height and setback requirements. The overlay, just like any new development, will add to the rich fabric of housing and buildings that we have in Cambridge. And more importantly, it would provide homes for people who deserve to be able to access the same opportunities as their higher income neighbors. That includes, you know, we have lots of examples of buildings that are, you know, single family homes next to 3-story buildings. I live in a 2-story building built in 1797 that's next to a 3.5-story building that was built in 1902. And we both take advantage of the street trees that provide us lots of shade. So I think that we can build upon that and build a better city for the future. It's going to be one of many tools that we can use to increase affordability and pursue an equity agenda in Cambridge. And I think it's a really critical first step, and it will require funding to ensure its effectiveness. So I urge you to consider that as well. So thank you for your time, and I hope to see it in ordinance committee.
Thank you. Could you leave your comments? Great. Teresa?
Teresa Hamaker,
followed by Stephen Kaiser, followed by Josh Cohen. Thank
Teresa
you.
Hamaker, 95 Raymond Street. Having had some time to digest the proposal and heard some commentary about it, my largest concern with the proposal is the lack of meaningful public input into the process. As a member of the Avon Hill Neighborhood Conservation District Commission, I've become really aware of the benefit of that kind of public input that can influence designs. You often end up with better designs for the community, Also, the public input process lowers tensions. It allows people to feel that they've had input. It's inclusive. It focuses on people's needs. So I would strongly recommend that the proposal be amended to include meaningful public input. I realize this might add delay, but I think that these are buildings, they're going to be around for a long time, and a little bit of a delay is an appropriate thing. I'll also just comment that I am concerned about unintended consequences of a major change in our zoning rules. While there seems to be a lot of confidence in the current affordable housing developers about their intentions, when you create large new rights, there are always people that want to make money off of those rights, and I would be concerned about less scrupulous developers taking advantage of the new permissions. While I really appreciate the goals of this proposal and I share them, and I appreciate the enthusiastic support for speeding up the process, I do wonder whether a more moderate proposal might not move us along in that direction without creating the risk of unintended consequences that further divides our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Stephen Kaiser, followed by Josh Cohen, followed by Reverend Washington. Mr. Kaiser, are you out there?
He was there. Who was the first one? There he is. Oh, here.
Oh, okay.
Apologies, my hearing isn't very good. In my initial review of the new amendment revisions, virtually all of the defects that I identified remain. They're still there. I contend the current draft is not ready for prime time as zoning for the city of Cambridge. A city that cannot publish its own completed master plan is unworthy of having citizen support for the complex, radical, and indeed revolutionary zoning document that desperately needs more thought and planning. I would now like to adopt a couple sentences from the letter of Tony Harry, of April 18th. Tony was the director of real estate at MIT and produced the housing plan in 1969. His efforts produced the Lyndon Johnson Apartments and the Millers River elderly housing. He achieved more than all of these plans shown here in terms of getting affordable housing in the city of Cambridge, and has never been recognized by the city council as far as I know. Tony said, "The permanent harmful effects this change would impose on our city would be a disaster. We urge in the strongest terms that this proposal be carefully analyzed, explained, discussed, and thoughtfully considered before enacting any part into law." Tony continues, "Please do not rush into such radical new zoning. It is essential that its new proposal and its likely consequences be carefully explained to all citizens so that they understand what is being proposed and what the effects will be." I would like to close by supporting the efforts of Charles Franklin. He's put a lot of effort into his alternative plan. He's been stiffed, stonewalled. It's not fair. It's not right. He should be given equal time. So I'm very concerned about this process. Do not forward on this defective zoning petition. Thank you.
Josh Cohen, followed by Reverend Washington, followed by Tom Pounds. And please, when you're up here, say your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Josh Cohen. I live at 276 Huron Avenue. My wife Margot and I have 2 kids who are enrolled at Amigos. Personally and professionally, I'm an advocate for affordable housing. My company doesn't own in Cambridge and isn't exploring any sites here. I believe deeply that affordable housing is a critical public policy issue. The overlay is a great idea for 3 reasons. It promotes economic justice, it's an innovative tool, and it can help address climate change. First, economic justice. It's not fair that certain areas of our city will forever be off limits to people of low and moderate incomes. The 2019 60% AMI for a 3-person household is $64,000. These are working households who deserve places to live here in Cambridge, access to our schools, public transportation, and thriving economy. Second, innovative tool. When property owners sell to developers in this super hot Cambridge market, sellers want 3 things: price, speed, and certainty. Typically, affordable housing can't offer even one of those 3. The overlay will help with all three. Price, because by giving affordable developers more density, we give them a chance to match the market price. Speed, because by giving affordable housing a chance to be built as of right, we dramatically speed up the time from P&S to a closing. And certainty, because sellers will know that the city is fully behind the creation of affordable housing and will provide the subsidy to make these deals happen. These deals are, by definition, economically infeasible. They require subsidy from the Cambridge Affordable Housing Trust. The overlay deliberately shifts some of the control over affordable housing from abutters who have a well-documented history of opposing affordable housing to CDD and the trust. Third, climate policy. The overlay maintains the city's Section 22 green building requirements. When timber is harvested sustainably, wood frame, energy-efficient buildings can help draw down carbon from the atmosphere.
Sorry, Josh, I have to cut you off. Could you leave
Thank you.
your comments? Reverend Washington, followed by Tom Pounds, followed by Anthony Thomas.
Reverend Ellis Washington, pastor of St. Paul AME Church, 37 Bishop Allen Drive. Also on behalf of the Cambridge Black Pastors Alliance, which submits the following letter. Affordable housing in Cambridge is near and dear to the heart of our diverse constituents and their families, friends, and colleagues who live or serve throughout the city of Cambridge and beyond, from young adults to senior citizens. Therefore, it is critical and must be a priority that city zoning ordinances be enhanced and updated to be aligned with the stated will of the city to expand opportunities for affordable housing. Greater flexibility in the zoning system is necessary for more timely and efficient action on behalf of the citizens of the city of Cambridge. Why affordable housing now across the city? Housing in Cambridge is getting less affordable. According to the overlay housing petition, a family must earn over $125,000 per year to afford to rent a 3-bedroom home at market rate. The median household income in 2017 reached only $83,122. Affordable housing across the city of Cambridge is important for improving and sustaining the economic viability of Cambridge both now and for the future of the city, to attract the everyday kinds of folk that help to make this city run daily, such as the teachers, firefighters, social workers, and others. According to the overlay report, no more than 20% of teachers who work in Cambridge live in Cambridge. This statistic alone demonstrates the high cost associated with living in this city. Affordable housing is essential for the holistic well-being of the diverse families at large who live throughout the city. It is also crucial for the vibrant young adult population served by this cosmopolitan city. The median age in Cambridge in 2017 was 30. If we envision these young adults choosing to lay stake in the ground and socially invest in Cambridge in whatever neighborhood they so choose, then together we will see the urgency to no longer delay a viable, affordable
Reverend.
housing zoning plan in
If you
Cambridge.
leave your letter there, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Tom Pounds, followed by Anthony Thomas, followed by Powell, I can't read the last name, from 2 Earhart Street.
Good evening. I'm Tom Pounds, 102 Lexington Ave. I'm the publisher and editor of the latest edition of the AIA Guide to Boston Architecture, a mobile app for the iPhone. As in that capacity, I've had a chance to draft descriptions of more than 1,200 buildings, neighborhoods, and parks across the metro area, including hundreds in Cambridge. From that experience, I've seen that attractive, distinctive neighborhoods such as ours are scarce, difficult to replicate, and fragile. They can indeed change over the decades, and they do. I'd like to focus my comments just on the proposal to streamline the design review process. As drafted, developers of these projects would still be required to host community meetings and undertake 2 cycles of review with the planning board, but any input they receive would be non-binding. They would only need to comply with these process steps. With those boxes checked, they're free to ignore all feedback and apply for a building permit. This is a terrible idea. Without the need to reach agreement with the planning board, there would be no incentive for developers to engage talented, creative architects who often do their best work under constraints such as the tight budgets that characterize successful affordable housing projects. Indeed, we should expect them to spend as little as possible on design and to simply optimize their projects for lowest cost. Over time, this would diminish the quality of our neighborhoods and compromise the character of our city. Design review is not a panacea. Alewife is among the worst recent developments in the region in terms of the poor quality of the overall plan and the banal design of many of the buildings. So whatever review process exists today is clearly flawed. But that's not a good reason to weaken it further. Let's use this opportunity to put in place a review process that will lead to better design, not worse. Please take the time to ensure this effort results not only in more affordable housing, but also in buildings and neighborhoods that we can all be proud to pass along to future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony Thomas? And if you have the comments, Tom, can you please leave them? Before Anthony starts speaking, Jeffrey Holmes, if you're speaking, you can line up. If you're not, that's fine. The person after that is Paweł Letovic, followed by Chris Mackin. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for listening. My name is Anthony Thomas, and I live at 348 Franklin Street, and I'm here to speak in favor of the affordable housing overlay. I'd like to start by posing a question. What kind of city does Cambridge want to be? Do we want to be a place where low-income communities are relegated to certain parts of our city? Where we continue the history of racial and socioeconomic segregation? Or do we want to be a city that encourages diversity, inclusion, and sustainability? Because the status quo is not sustainable. I want to live in a city that puts people, mothers, fathers, children, friends, even those who make less than us, first. I want to put them before tree-lined streets with single-family homes and rose gardens. Let's put people first and support this overlay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jeffrey, are you out there? No. Oh, you're not. Okay, great. Just wanted to confirm. Paweł Letovic, followed by Chris Mackin, followed by Dominique Jones.
Hi, my name is Paul Otavietz of 2 Earhart Street, Unit 409. Thanks for the pronunciation. So I'm a renter, as you can probably tell. I'm an immigrant, and I support the affordable housing overlay. I've heard some folks say that Cambridge is full, so I wanted to give you all a feeling for what full means to families like mine. I live in a one-bedroom apartment with my wife and dog, and when we expand our family to have children, we fully expect to stay in that one-bedroom apartment. You may dismiss this as wishful thinking, but this is exactly who the previous tenants were: parents, pet, and toddler in that one-bedroom apartment. Now, myself, our family, and the previous family before us, we were well-paid, white-collar professionals. So myself, I'm a scientist. The previous tenants was a medical doctor. But because we've been pushed to live in this full Cambridge, in our version of a full Cambridge, precisely because of its unwillingness to build housing and willingness to privilege landowning interests. Yet, we are lucky. We are secure, and we can contemplate raising children in Cambridge. I can only imagine the strain that those families feel who are insecure, who don't have the funds to afford to remain in Cambridge and see rents going further and further out of reach. That is why this overlay will help by providing those families a home. I urge the committee to move the process forward and submit as a formal zoning ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for leaving it. Chris Mackin, followed by Dominic Jones, followed by Trudy Goodman.
Good evening. My name is Chris Mackin. I reside at 48 JFK Street. In previous testimony to this committee, I made reference to the dynamics of this debate, in particular of a dynamic of moral competition that has been launched by supporters of the overlay, which they assert over those who oppose some or all of the overlay. A more precise term for the moral competition that has been launched is moral appropriation. Appropriation is the claim that one side, the overlay side, has a monopoly on virtue. They own it and resist claims that others might make as so much selfish noise about matters such as of right procedures that guarantee property owners a voice and, God forbid, trees. If only it was that simple, and if only those ideas cited were the only ideas we cared about. Instead, the motley crew of overlay opponents from the neighborhoods are the same people who put forward a slew of ideas that would increase affordable housing more quickly and clearly than those on the other side. Is the other side talking about and helping people who are being evicted from apartments by the dynamics of development yesterday and today? Is the other side talking about ending single-family zoning so as to encourage more naturally affordable housing units in all the neighborhoods of the city? Is the other side taking an inventory of the various public properties upon which housing can be constructed tomorrow? The irony in all of this is that instead of pressuring their elected leaders to directly take responsibility for affordable housing, Overlay supporters have outsourced the hard work to the development community. They will build, 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 and all will be well. The right way forward is not the 100% affordable housing overlay zoning petition before you tonight. The right way forward is a collection of ideas to protect vulnerable citizens, to extend and expand existing affordable housing stock, to amend zoning laws without eliminating them, and yes, to build where building makes sense on terms that are best for citizens, residents, and for developers. Second.
Can we
Thank
have can you leave your comments? Thank you, sir. Dominic Jones, followed by Trudy Goodman, followed by Mary Lee Meyer.
Dominic Jones, 6 Hurlbut Street. No one at the recent Housing Committee meetings seemed to be clear what form-based coding is. It was being cited by city officials as the exclusive reward for 100% affordable housing developers. Essentially, form-based coding views how the city develops, block by block, artery by artery, neighborhood by neighborhood, but not by individual lot restrictions as at present. Paris, Washington, Manhattan, and even parts of Boston were designed on this idea. And it could be very good indeed for this city. It could provide affordable housing simply by increasing the supply of housing. Successful high-tech cities like ourselves always generate the need for affordable housing. We need to plan this city as a whole, not by bribing certain developers on a piecemeal basis. And the public should know what is being debated, which it does not at the moment. The overlay should therefore be dropped. Even city officials think it might have a minimal impact. Instead, form-based coding should be studied as a better solution to affordable housing by encouraging all developers to build in a beautifully redesigned city.
Trudy Goodman, followed by Mary Lee Meyer, followed by Nicola Williams.
Hello. I've been here several times now. First thing I want to say is...
Name and address, thanks.
Oh, please. Okay, here we go. So my name is Trudy Goodman. I live at 1221 Cambridge Street in Cambridge, the Inman Square Apartments. So as I said, well, I've been here a lot of different times. I want to start by saying something about Cheryl M. Pizzacioli, who happened to be my neighbor who lived across the hallway from me for 25 years. We did not agree about the overlay, but here's the thing, and I wish people would get this. There's always room for compromise in these situations. And I've come here before, and I've said, I think that some of the ideas that Charles Franklin and other people like Stephen Kaiser put forward would help the overlays. I definitely want to see affordable housing. I'm in desperate need of it myself. I also want to say something else, and it's very important. No matter who agrees or doesn't agree to the affordable housing overlay, it's got to stop. It has to stop where people are being vicious with each other. It really doesn't help anyone or anything. We love the city. I've lived in the city as of June for 40 years. My family had a business here. I want to stay here. I am not somebody's abutter. I am a person who needs better housing. Most of the people that I know need better housing. Cheryl Ann needed better housing. This is what we're supposed to be doing here, is putting together better housing. Let's come to a compromise that moves this forward and helps us get quality housing that is well built, that people can live in. Right now, what I live in, I wouldn't ask a dog to live in. Thank you very much.
Mary Lee Meyer, if you have comments, Trudy, you can leave them in the basket. Thanks. Mary Lee Meyer, followed by Nicola Williams, followed by James Zhao.
Hi, Mary Lee Meyer, 10 Dana Street.
Last night, town meeting, Arlington's upzoning proposal was withdrawn for lack of votes. Perhaps the residents for responsible redevelopment forced officials to look at the fine print and loopholes. Maybe the plan was too vague. Lost in this Cambridge shuffle is the concept that the city is more than just one constituency, and building at any cost is irresponsible. What gets imposed today will affect every single resident, both owners and the 60% renters who are being forced out for luxury units, and the housing list gets longer. This is a self-perpetuating vicious cycle. The overlay is too misleading in its promises to desperate people. Not all problems in the building are caused by abutters. There are code and deed issues at play. 100 units per year can be found faster in additions, basements, possible down payments, mortgages. An extra $20 million would help, but this plan ignores the fine print. Form-based code needs to be applied citywide, not just spot zoned, and there are has to be as many as 25 design patterns for neighborhood context, according to experts. Fixing the zoning we have now, don't throw it away. And all these houses that you have on the boards here were done under current zoning. This plan is still, plan is still baby stepping despite the last minute changes right before a public hearing. Really? This lumbering overlay cannot move forward without proper due process and transparency. Otherwise, the plan will fail, and we all will pay a price for little gain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Lee. Please leave your comments in the basket. Nicola Williams, followed by James Zhao, followed by Lee Ferris.
Good evening. Nicola Williams, 8 Brewer Street. So I'm going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good. First, I want to give praise to the mayor, city council, city managers, and all city staff for their support of the Central Square bid. I think that was a good thing. And I wish the overlay conversation went as smoothly and included so many support and stakeholders as the residents did for the bid. The good thing about the overlay is that we're having a conversation and we're trying to do something. And I know you as counselors care about our housing situation, and I believe that the community knows that too. The bad. It's a bad plan. I got to be honest with you. The way it's written right now, it's a bad plan. It will serve very few residents. It gives up the democratic process, and I'm concerned that it will not make a huge dent into the 19,000 people that's on our waiting list. The changes is a moving target. I just got changes today just because someone forwarded it to me. I can't keep up. And many in the community, they don't know the consequences of the overlay. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of alternative facts and misinformation out there. The ugly. The discourse is not something to be proud of. The overlay discussion has divided the community, and it seems that very little regard for homeowners. There's a lot of alternative facts, like I said. There's confusion, and we are one city, one community, and we need to act that way. I really plead to get some peace. Thank God the reverends are here and understanding for our city. My advice to you today, and my plea to you today as counselors, is that we're not ready to move on. Do the right thing. Start over. Do it right. The process needs a do-over.
If you can please email your comments to the clerk, that'd be great. Thank you. James Zhao, followed by Lee Ferris, followed by Tina Liu.
I'm James Zoll, 203 Pemberton Street in North Cambridge. I would like to urge the members of the Housing Committee to move this proposal on to the Ordinance Committee, where I hope it will continue to be discussed, tweaked, and eventually be passed. I would also like to urge the opponents of this proposal to more carefully read some of the materials that have been put together by the Community Development Department, and if they do, I think they will see that it is not going to do as many of the things that they fear will happen to the city. We've heard a long list of things that people like about Cambridge, the things they've mentioned I like as well. I would like to see them available to all people in Cambridge. In a city in which 60-something, I believe, of the existing residential buildings do not conform to the existing zoning regulations, it's a mistake to cling to that as if a tweak that is going to affect relatively few buildings in the city is going to somehow devastate the city and its neighborhoods. I would urge you to move this process forward. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have your comments written, you can put them in the basket. Lee Ferris, followed by Tina Liu, followed by Risa Rudnick.
Good evening, Lee Ferris, 269 Norfolk Street. Thanks for everybody that keeps working hard on the overlay. I'm happy to see the changes that are in the plan as of yesterday in the zoning. I do think we still need more work. I'm particularly glad to see the restoration and clarification of the planning board role. I also want to mention the Envision report, as I understand it, is due in early May, and I hope to see the restart of that planning process so that our residents see all of the other affordable housing measures that we are considering, and so that they understand that the overlay is not the only thing that we're working towards. As a member of the Envision Housing Committee, I think that's really important. Some things that I would like to ask questions and clarify about the overlay. I think that the community review process needs to be stronger and clearer. So in addition to notifying abutters about a community meeting, the city should be required to post a visible sign in front of the property, like with a BZA hearing. The city should notify abutters of abutters and also notify nearby neighborhood organizations. And there should be a mandatory at least 2 weeks notification, all of the above, that the meeting is taking place. The proposal that is in the zoning now is not adequate at all. I do think that there should be requirements for affordable home ownership as well as family units in the zoning. It's also important to add guidelines, including criteria for site selection, program, and design, including transitions and contextual integration. And I would like to see clear protections for retaining existing buildings and clear guidelines about adding on to existing buildings. Thank you, and I will email the rest of my comments.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tina, followed by Risa, followed by Corinne Espinoza.
My name is Tina Alou. I live at 113.5 Pleasant Street, and I'm here in support of you voting the affordable housing overlay out of housing to the ordinance committee. It's bittersweet to testify here tonight. Each time I wrote my testimony in the past, I always asked myself, what would Cheryl Ann think? Tonight, I decided to start with some of her comments instead of mine, because Cheryl Ann always said it better. She said, the 100% affordable housing zoning overlay would apply citywide so that we can create new affordable homes in all areas of the city. This would include high resource areas that have historically excluded lower income renter households and people of color, those people, and make them accessible to both families who are subsidized and unsubsidized, who want to move to or stay in Cambridge. As a community, we do not view proposed zoning and community development decisions through an affordable housing or racial equity lens, but through the lens of local control and decision-making by abutters. It's worth asking, whose views, benefits, and burdens do we prioritize? This Saturday, I will be attending the last of the Digging Deep sessions that focused on race, equity, and inclusion. The final session will reflect on what next steps we can take individually and as a city. I know I will see many of you there. I ask you to all think about the steps you will take in your role as city councilor to increase the equity in the city. Equity is defined as fairness in procedures, processes, and the distribution of resources. Equity exists when disparities in the outcomes experienced by historically underrepresented populations have been eliminated. Equity requires changing structures of power and privilege. One step you could take is to vote to move the Housing to Ordinance Committee.
Thank you, Dina. We'll take your comments. Risa, followed by Karina Espinoza, followed by, I think I saw Eugenia leave. I think she left. Go ahead, thanks.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Risa Mednick. I live at 20 Maple Avenue. I'm here tonight in support of the Affordable Housing Overlay and urge the Council to act swiftly to advance the process that will lead to its implementation someday. The Affordable Housing Overlay is not the one single solution to the enormous housing crisis that Cambridge, the region, and much of the country is facing, but it is a positive means of creating some affordable housing throughout the city. It's a way of making inroads toward a more inclusive community. It's a public policy tool that moves us toward greater equity in a time of grotesque and inescapable inequities. In Cambridge, we can welcome new neighbors without displacing existing families. We can play to our strengths and use resources in new ways. This whole community and its elected leaders must act boldly and responsibly with just and moral vision to systemically rebuild and sustain a healthy, thriving, diverse, and inclusive community. And so I urge you all to advance this process to the Ordinance Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinne, followed by, if the residents at the, I'm trying to read this, John Conan and Suzanne Graves, just want to make sure you don't want to speak. And if not, followed by Derek Capone. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Corinna Espinosa. I live at 20 Chestnut Street. I completely support the Affordable Housing Zoning Overlay, and I ask the Housing Committee to please move this to the Ordinance Committee. I support any and all efforts that could move the needle on providing more affordable housing for people in Cambridge. I do view the dearth of affordable housing as an emergency. Families are being evicted, separated from their community, disconnected from their networks of support, including extended family, friends, schools, doctors, and childcare. Other families are spending more than half of their take-home pay on rents, which affects our ability to pay for other things their family needs, including urgent medical care, for example. I'm not okay with Cambridge becoming a wealthy enclave with nearly no economic diversity. I'm not okay with increasing Cambridge's economic inequality. We need to act now in order to stave off these trends, and solutions will require uncompromising attention and commitment. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have comments, you can leave them in the basket. Great. John and Suzanne, you don't want to speak, right? Okay. Derek Capone, followed by Jim Skolioff. Sorry if I butchered that.
Good evening. Derek Capone, 8 Wright Street. I've been to a number of these meetings, and a number of councilors and people have requested more visual examples of what this zoning change would mean, and so I assume that's why we have all these posters with all these pictures today. But I think, as another speaker mentioned, they seem a bit disingenuous because almost all of these are like 2.5 story homes that look lovely, and that's not really what anyone is concerned about. We're concerned about these giant 4-story buildings with no parking and no green space and no setbacks being put right next to a 1 or 2 story home. And the only one that I see is that one way in the back might be 4 stories. I can't really see. So I think when you visually show things at public meetings, they should be representative of what people are actually concerned about. The other thing that I would just like to mention is that I hear a lot of members of this committee talk about nonprofit developers and not-for-profit developers, but this proposal is a massive financial handout to for-profit developers, and they will be one of the biggest recipients of money if this policy passes. And we've had some of these for-profit developers give public comment in front of this assembly, not identifying themselves as for-profit developers, but just taking the moral high ground and talking about equity and all this business. So I think it's important to discuss this issue honestly if we're really going to build consensus in the community. Thank you.
Derek, if you have comments, you can email or leave them there. Jim? followed by, if Leonard would like to speak, followed by Mahmood.
Hi, Jim Sokoloff, 45 Fresh Pond Parkway, and don't worry about it, everybody butchers my name. I recognize the importance and support the creation of additional affordable housing in addition to additional market rate housing. However, I'm opposed to the overlay exactly as proposed for the following reasons. I don't believe that a second parallel set of laws applying to one subset of developers and property owners, but not others, is sufficiently fair or reasonable in light of the availability of workable alternatives as I list below. This overlay proposal appears to be, and is pitched as, a way to more quickly permit the construction of structures which violate the current zoning ordinances without the inconvenience and expense of public hearings and the granting of variances where those variances from current ordinances are appropriate. I find the reduced setback requirements and increased height permissions particularly concerning in the contemplated as-of-right structure. Combining this with the prior point, I think it's unreasonable that a developer could purchase my property, build a 45-foot tall, 4-story structure, 10 feet from the lot line, with substantially higher lot coverage, while I or any other private owner would be restricted to, as near as I can tell, floor area ratio of 0.5, height of 35 feet, and 20-foot setbacks on both of my front yards. I think the passing of a broad as-of-right development permit, though no doubt expedient and convenient for the Cambridge Housing Authority and other affordable housing developers, to be too large of a next step towards supporting more affordable housing in Cambridge. I would suggest instead creating strong guidelines supporting of affordable housing to be used and considered by the zoning board during variance hearings. This permits the neighborhood and zoning board to contemplate and consider the specifics of a contemplated development project rather than passing a blanket as-of-right overlay that ties everyone's hands to an indeterminate future. In conjunction with that, if specific changes are appropriate to all users to increase density in a given district, make those neighborhood appropriate changes on a district-by-district basis. Over the years, I've attended several zoning board hearings for abutting and nearby properties and have consistently supported development in Cambridge. I find the variance process to be effective and the chance for real and genuine input into the review process for abutters to be important.
Thank you. Your testimony. Peggy, you out there? I don't see you. You don't want to speak, though. Peggy, do you want to? Okay. Just want to make sure. Mahmood, are you out here?
Good evening, Mahmoud Firuzbak. Wanted to speak in support of the overlay proposal. Having grown up in Cambridge through the decades, we're observing our communities changing and the middle class families sort of being squeezed out year after year. This seems like a creative way to support affordable housing, spread a little bit more out throughout the city to provide for housing for folks who are our teachers or firefighters or policemen. I hope that this proceeds to the ordinance committee, and I applaud all the efforts that have gone into this ordinance thus far.
Thank you for your testimony. Does Teresa from 210 Columbia Street want to speak? Or Kate from 124 Franklin Street? Okay, so that is all that we had folks who had signed up for public comment on these sheets. If you'd like to speak, you can come before and you have 2 minutes. If not, I will close public comment. Going once. Please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Toby Hyde, 11 Wendell Street. I speak to you in support of the affordable housing overlay, and I just reviewed the latest red line version that was released this afternoon, and I commend councilors for getting to work and really making some interesting compromises in the bill. So I just want to praise you for that and thank you for your work on it. I'll note that the relaxation in parking minimums wasn't as far as I can go as I would have gone, and the 6-story amendment in 35 feet of other places was interesting, not perfect, but I commend councilors for doing the work, finding common ground, and hopefully moving this out of housing to ordinance committee. I think it's an important step forward for equity in our community, and thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else? Okay, well, with that, I will move to close public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment now being closed. We'll move on to a presentation from the Community Development Department. Ms. Farouk, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to have a few introductory words to let you know what the material is that is before the council today, before the Housing Committee today. So what we provided yesterday was an updated version of the draft zoning text, and we have, in terms of the changes, incorporated some of the items, well, essentially the items where we felt we had some good guidance in terms of where there was some broad consensus. So things like an approach to dealing with transitions between where there was a lot of where there was significant height difference between a residential neighborhood zone versus a zone that might allow taller heights. There were certainly other issues that came up that you wouldn't see incorporated here because we felt that we did not have clear guidance. That, there seemed to be issues and items on either side. We heard support and not for a particular idea. So we're going to wait for further discussion tonight, or as this proceeds through the various council committees to get that additional feedback. And we expect absolutely to keep refining this as it moves forward. We also provided an updated version of the frequently asked questions document, which hopefully responds to some of the additional questions that came up at the last couple of hearings, particularly the one that had public comment. And then at the request of the council co-chairs, we have provided examples of existing 100% affordable housing projects. These are not intended to show what the future outcomes might be. This is simply a way to show how the way that the attention that people pay to design in terms of thinking through 100% affordable housing projects and the level of attention in current day. So just to give people also, there's a range of, we tried to provide a range of different scales and sizes so that people could see those in that entire variations. There are smaller projects, but there are also larger projects. And I know somebody pointed to the one in the back, but there are a couple on this wall that are also taller, that are 4 stories and or so. And we are continuing to work on some additional design modeling, and so as this proceeds, we absolutely will be bringing that forward to support the discussion. And then finally, we've started to pop a few visuals as we talk through the changes that have been that are being proposed in this revised or updated working draft. And I'm going to pass the microphone on to Jeff Roberts to Jeff Roberts to talk about those. And then, so some of those are images of existing buildings now. They will not all be affordable buildings. They're just intended to demonstrate a particular concept that's being discussed. And then there are a couple of sketches as well. So with that, Jeff Roberts.
Thanks. So let me just do something here. Okay, so there are a few slides that are left from the previous presentation. We're always happy to go back and talk about this, but we're going to jump right into talking about the overlay draft and some of the changes that we've been talking about. I want to touch on a couple of things first that have more to do with sort of the core concept of what we're talking about, and this is described in a little bit more detail in the FAQ document that's been referenced that was completed around the same time as this most recent draft. So in terms of this question, sort of ongoing discussion about as of right zoning, just to note, zoning at a baseline is meant to say what is allowed and what's not allowed. So that's really what we mean when we say as of right, as a kind of a concept in zoning. In Cambridge, many projects do have to seek relief under the current zoning. That's either because the zoning says that many things need special permits, need to undergo that process, or because a particular project doesn't conform to all the zoning requirements. And this has been true of a lot of projects and of affordable housing projects in particular. So the comprehensive permit process, which we talked a little bit about the last time, is what we have now that provides a streamlined way of dealing with special permits and variances. But it's still based on the notion that the project is going beyond what the zoning ordinance says is as allowed as of right. And we talked a little bit the last time about how that process carries the risk of appeal, and that results in uncertainty, which can be a considerable issue for affordable housing projects and for the city as a supporter of those projects. Also, from another perspective, one of the issues with the comprehensive permit process is an open-ended type of process where we, because it is varying from the zoning, we can't say what the resulting development will look like until it's gone through the process and until we get to the point where it reaches approval. So at a fundamental level, the approach of this overlay is to spell out up front what the rules are for affordable housing projects as an alternative to a process where the outcome has to be determined on a case-by-case basis. And another thing I wanted to talk about, because it came up in the questions last time, again, this is a little bit more detail in the FAQ, is the question about preservation of existing buildings and what this zoning does. So it's a little harder to describe because it has more to do with how our zoning works currently when working with an existing building. So when there's a site with an existing building and you want to figure out how you might use that building for an affordable housing project, say it's a large building and you try to make use of it by adding units or floor area. Under current zoning, there are density limitations such as FAR, lot area per dwelling unit, limitations that require a variance. If it's a building where you might want to have an addition, or there might be a possibility to make an alteration to the exterior that would allow keeping the building while adding more units to the site, then that might also trigger a special permit or a variance to make an addition to an existing non-conforming building, because as we discussed last time, many of the buildings in Cambridge are non-conforming. And if it's a non-residential building being converted to a residential use, that might require special permits and variances even if the building doesn't change, because residential uses sometimes have different setback and open space requirements than non-residential uses. And if it's an old building that never had parking and then parking needs to be added by creating new housing units, that means curb cuts, driveways, and finding space on the site to fit parking spaces, or else seeking another special permit in order to waive that. So ultimately, in any circumstance for a given site, there may or may not be intrinsic value to keeping the existing building from an economic or historic standpoint. That might be true regardless of the zoning. But if there is a benefit to keeping that building, either because it's more cost effective to renovate rather than demolish and rebuild, or if the building has historic value and it's deemed preferable to incorporate that into the project, then the intention of the zoning and the more flexible sort of dimensional standards are intended to provide the flexibility to do that. So with those 2 points, just go through some of what's in the text. Just a quick overview, and I'll focus a little bit on the parts where there are substantial changes. I'll talk a little bit about the applicability piece. It addresses some questions that came up the last time. The standards for eligibility eligibility, rent, and initial sales price, there is a small modification relating to how the monitoring works. I'm not going to go into that, but we're happy to answer questions. I'll talk a little bit about the development standards as I go. The parking, there are no changes in the current version, so I won't go through that, but we can certainly go back and discuss parking if it's something we want to continue to discuss. Design standards, I'll talk a little bit about. The design consultation process, just really some small modifications to make part of that process more clear in terms of how it works. I won't talk about that in detail, but again, it's something we can go back and discuss. And implementation is a section that's been added, simply intended to authorize regulations to be promulgated similar to what we have in inclusionary zoning. And again, I won't go into that in detail. It's fairly simple. So on the applicability, this had to do with a question that came up the last time, and the key point is that this is conceived as an all or nothing sort of approach. So a project would have to meet all of the standards in order to come under the overlay or to benefit from the provisions in the overlay. There is a trade-off here. You know, for example, if there were an existing affordable housing project that wanted to reduce its parking, but some other aspect of the building didn't conform to what was in the overlay, it wouldn't be allowed to do that under this overlay. So it would have to meet sort of everything. In terms of the height and number of stories, this is just a reiteration. Per the previous slide, under this formulation, it would allow 4-story buildings in some areas and 7-story buildings in other areas. So if a project is in a district with a higher height limit, wanted to go taller, it would have to do that under the normal zoning. It wouldn't come under this overlay, and it would, if under the normal zoning there are special permits or other requirements that would apply, then it would have to go through that process. We did add something that we talked a little bit about the last time, a transition standard. It's something that we currently include in as a concept in zoning for some areas. The idea is to have a required step down from 7 to 5 stories where a project borders a lower height district. The idea, and Iram did a good job with her arm the last time, but this diagram maybe does almost the same job of showing that this really, the idea is to create sort of a sky plane, or the pointer works. So, you know, if by having this setback, if you're in on a lower site, and this, you know, this in a budding building, it could be, you know, closer or further away depending on the conditions of the lot. But if you're up close to where that higher height district is, you would, you know, if you're close enough, then looking up would mean you would not perceive the additional bulk of the 7 stories. What you would really see is the 5-story bulk. So as it's conceived here, it's 35 feet from the district line. It may not seem like much, but in many of these districts, in these higher scale districts, they only extend about 100 feet from the main corridor. So going deeper than 35 feet means going even further into the buildable area on the lot. So that's the balance with that type of provision. Setbacks in open space, not much has changed fundamentally. We did try to clarify some things that are true in current zoning, including that parking is not open space. Again, we do include a provision where we acknowledge there is a trade-off in terms of site area, that it can be difficult to accommodate both parking and open space, but parking does not count as open space. And even if the parking is permeable parking is not permeable open space. Open space is really meant for, you know, for pedestrian use and for utilization by, you know, human beings, not in cars. There are a couple other things we added which are actually somewhat different from the way we treat open space in current zoning, but it seemed like it was appropriate in this case. And one is to not include the upper story balconies and decks towards the open space requirement. Under current zoning, you can count some of that as part of the open space requirement. And we've clarified that, you know, while bicycle parking is generally, even under current zoning, considered not to impede open space. We've said that it wouldn't count towards the permeable open space requirement, so it would still need to be provided. So the permeability would still need to be provided separate from the bicycle parking. So this again on the building and site requirements. These are the design standards. This is just an overview of many of the standards that were included. Those have not changed from the previous version. The area that we have put some additional thought in is around facades. And this is a somewhat challenging exercise because the goal is to promote good design while at the same time allowing for variation and not being so prescriptive that we end up with the same sort of cookie cutter design approach repeated across Cambridge. So the way that we've thought about this from a zoning standpoint is to think about what are the minimum standards that we need to have in place to prevent the kind of outcomes that maybe we don't want, but to leave enough flexibility that the standards could be met in different ways. So one of the key areas that we looked at was requiring some minimum amount of projecting and recessed elements on the facade. The point is to promote designs that read as having more of a residential character and to avoid designs that appear flat or might feel more commercial in their nature. There are different ways that can be done. We can see recessed balconies, projecting bays, or projecting sunshades as ways to promote that type of character. And then the other main area we looked at was windows and detailing. We want to promote a minimum amount of window glass. 15%, again, might not seem like a large number, but you'd be surprised looking around Cambridge, as some of our team members have, that what we look at as sort of being good traditional residential buildings, often when you actually measure it out, end up being about 15 to 20% window on the facade. So that's an important piece of it. And then another important piece is promoting detailing around those window elements that provide depth and texture to the facade. So that is an overview of the key changes. Happy to answer questions either about this or to discuss any of the other elements that hadn't changed from the last time.
Thank you for that presentation. Please let the record show that Councilor Carlone did call in to the co-chairs to say that he would not be able to be with us this evening. So we would like to let the record show that he did let us know he would not be able to attend. If your presentation is complete, pleasure of the committee. Pleasure of the committee. If there are no questions, let's not fight. Comments and thoughts are fine as well.
Okay, then I guess I do have something to say. Thank you. First of all, I wanted to thank you, and thanks for the presentation and folks who came out to speak tonight. I do want to reiterate something, Councilor Simmons, that you said earlier about the process and kind of where this is going. And if this is to move out of the Housing Committee, and the Housing Committee is not a committee of the whole. It's been virtually every meeting, pretty much all the councilors have been here, but it is not a committee of the whole, which means that not everyone at this table, or councilors at this table, can vote on amendments or things, right? Because if you're not a member of the Housing Committee, you can't vote. So moving this to the Ordinance Committee would allow for a more complete conversation, because that is a committee of the whole, and that will allow every councilor to take part more meaningfully in this conversation. Secondly, the role of the Housing Committee, and this is something that we've done, we did this with inclusionary zoning and incentive zoning, where the Housing Committee held the initial meetings to hear from people, to get people's feedback, to kind of create a framework, and then it moved to the Ordinance Committee, where we actually started to talk about the meat of the ordinance, which is not what the Housing Committee's job is or its duties. So if this moves on, it is going to allow us to really start to have more meaningful conversation as an entire body about the details of the ordinance itself. If it stays in the Housing Committee, it's going to be more of the meetings that we've had, right? And more general discussion, more presentations, but we're not really getting into the meat of the ordinance. So I don't want, and Councilor Siddiqui, you said this earlier too, that if this is to move on, nothing is being passed tonight other than to send this to ordinance to continue a dialogue and a conversation. So I just want folks to understand that, because I think there's, again, some misinformation out there. I wrote down a lot of things listening to folks, and I'm not going to go through them all because I can't. I'm all over the place. But, you know, we did hear a number of people talk about other ideas to help address our affordable housing crisis. And you're right. You're absolutely right. And I don't think anyone on this council has ever said that there's a silver bullet answer to this and that the overlay is that silver bullet answer. It is one piece of a puzzle to address a very complex problem. And what this is trying to address is the complex problem that it is almost financially impossible for affordable housing to be built in certain parts of the city. So I looked this up. Just so you know, this is a little chart that was in one of the earlier documents, and I don't think it gets enough play, but this was startling for me. When you look at the number of units in different neighborhoods and how the percentage of those units that are affordable. My glasses on. In the Port, 34.5% of their units are affordable for low and middle income people, more than a third. North Cambridge is 24.5%. Harrington Wellington, 20.6%. Cambridge Port, 20%. Now let's contrast that. Neighborhood 9, 9.8% are affordable. Mid-Cambridge, 6.8% are affordable. Agassiz, 5.3% affordable. West Cambridge, 1.3% affordable. It's not the fault of anybody in this room. Nobody in this room was around when redlining happened. But when you look at those numbers, we have segregated neighborhoods in our city. Not because anyone in this room is bad, but that's the result. That's it. Those are the numbers. We love data in this city. Well, let's pay attention to the data. And that doesn't sit well with me. The fact that 1.3% of the houses, of the units in West Cambridge are considered affordable for low and middle income people. And if we truly believe in being an equitable community and being a diverse community, that shouldn't sit well with anybody. And so, you know, many of the folks that have concerns about the overlay are concerned about how this will change their neighborhood or their street. I get it. You love where you live, and the thought of that changing it's anxiety provoking. I get it. But I also wonder why we always think change is bad. Right? Why does change have to be negative? And you know, and I've said this before, you know, I actually live on a street that went through this. Right? So a lot of folks, whether you're for the overlay or not, don't actually live on a street or a neighborhood that actually saw this kind of change happen. I actually do. So I can speak from a personal perspective. The street I grew up on was all 1- and 2-family homes, and there was a 1-story business. Over time, those lots were sold, and now my street has 3 buildings that are 6, 6, and 8 stories, next to houses that are 2-family, 2 stories, 3 stories, 1 story. And that change was actually good. There are more people on my street. There are more families on my street. Those people, some of the folks who live in those buildings, they go to school with my kids. They've been friends with my kids and grew up together. So I've been through it, so I understand the anxiety, but I've also seen the other side of it. And I just want to let folks know it can work. So, you know, I think that we have an opportunity here. And again, we'll work out, there'll be more changes and there'll be more details that get corrected, which I also think is a good thing. We heard some folks concerned that things have changed. Well, isn't that what process is? If we went through all of this and we didn't make one correction to what was originally put out a few months ago, people would be irate that we didn't listen and we didn't change anything. So it's good that things have changed. That's good. We should keep doing that. We should keep tweaking and getting to a place where this is better. But to do that, we got to move, and we got to move it on. And I would love this conversation to not be yes overlay, no overlay, but how do we make the overlay better and work? And so I, for one, I mean, I'm not a member of this committee, but as an official member, I am as the mayor. But I, for one, hope that we move this forward so that we can have more in-depth conversations about the ordinance itself and really start that process to tweak this in a more meaningful way. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Mallon, any comments, questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I just want to thank the CDD for all your hard work and really taking all of what we said in the past couple of meetings and responding to residents' concerns as well and putting it into the zoning. Of course, it's a process, and we are really working towards that, but I really want to applaud your hard work and really being creative and coming up with a process and a solution that we can all be looking at. And I'm not a person who thinks that 24 hours ago was an inappropriate amount of time to have this in front of us. I appreciated having the whole day to really look into this and really think about it. So I don't want you to hear that as a criticism from me at all. And just to go back to something that the mayor said, you know, if you think about the Port neighborhood, it has 30% of the affordable housing in the city. But we just saw a neighborhood report that came out with some statistics from Cliff Cook, right, that says that diversity is changing too, that we are losing socioeconomic and racial diversity in the Port. We are in a critical situation right now. If we really value diversity in this city, we need to be doing something. This may not be perfect yet, and it isn't a silver bullet, but we need to be doing something, and we need to be acting urgently. I really feel that. So I appreciate the work that you've put into this to act on this urgently. You know, just to go back to something that Councillor Simmons said that Cheryl Ann used to say is this is about the people. This is about the people that are living in our city that are being displaced every single day. And you know, I do pay attention to what goes on online and on the neighborhood listservs, and I do respond to every single email that comes into me about questions around the overlay. And one of the things that has come up is that we're building housing for people who don't live here. I think that's a thing that people think, that we're building all these units for people who don't live here. And I know that I receive calls every single week. All of us receive calls every single week, and they're not from people who don't live here. Just to give you an example, a couple of examples are from just this week. I have a 90-year-old woman whose triple-decker just sold. She's low income. She's lived there for 50 years. She needs to find another place to live. There isn't a place for her right now. I have a family whose multi-unit was sold to another owner. None of them had leases, and they all have Section 8 vouchers. It's 6 families that have lived here. Their families are in school here. They have no place to go. I have a homeless mother and her high school-age daughter who's a senior who's trying to go to college next year. She's doing her best. She's living with family. Her entire support system is here in Cambridge. She grew up here. We need to find a place for her. There's no place for her right now. There's a single mom with her 2 kids that lost her apartment 6 months ago due to an unattainable rent increase in her new lease. She's been taken in with it by a family member, but that situation is untenable because she's been there for 6 months and it's time for her to go. There's no place for her to go. These are the units that we're talking about, trying to create here in this community for residents who live here, who are being displaced every single day. And that's just this week. So those are some comments. One of the things that I wanted to know from the last several meetings was some case studies from our affordable housing builders of properties that they bid on, that they lost out on, what they could have built in current zoning and what they could have built under this affordable housing overlay. And Deborah from Just to Start has provided me with a couple of case studies that I think are really illustrative, and I'm hoping that she could present a couple of those right now, if you don't mind indulging us.
Thank you for your questions. I'll start by saying Just to Start is a nonprofit community development corporation with a mission to providing housing for low and moderate income people in Cambridge. And next month, we will break ground on the first development of new units that we've been able to do in over 7 years. So that's a case in point about why this is needed. But had this overlay been in effect more than a year ago, I'm going to tell you about 2 properties we would have had that could have been providing housing to as many as 95 units. One of them is a parcel near Inman Square. Some people may know it as the Hondar House. It was 14,755 square feet at an asking price of $5 million. With the current zoning, we could have done 16 units at a cost of $312,000 a unit just to buy the land. When you add cost on top of that, that would not be supported by funders to finance. It wouldn't have been feasible. And the city, CDD, wouldn't support going forward with that. With this ordinance, with this change in the zoning, we could put 40 units on it, not saying we would put 40 units, but it could support 40 units at an acquisition cost of $125,000 per unit. That is more feasible and could have happened. Example 2 is the Rite Aid building on Mass Ave, just below Porter Square. The sale price there was $7.1 million for 12,425 square feet. And current zoning would have allowed 27 units at an acquisition cost of $262,000 just for the land. Again, too high. We lost that property, but it could have, with this zoning, supported 55 units. Again, on a corridor, on a good place for transit, et cetera. So those 2 examples mean there could have been 95 more units underway right now.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And for those of us at the table who take these phone calls every day, those 95 units, those are people that I think about. I have a list of people that, a running list of people, and I know we all do as well. So thank you for providing that. I thought that was really illustrative, and I hope maybe HRI and others can come up with some case studies just to really kind of give us a full picture of what we're missing out on and what this overlay could really unlock. Because 95 units is a lot and not a lot. So I think I'm gonna see my time because I know other people want to speak, but thank you for providing that information.
Thank you, Councilor. Vice Mayor, would you like to speak, comment, questions?
Well, I have some comments, but why don't you take somebody else because I was not expecting to be called on. Computers come back to life, sorry. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to CDD and everyone for participating in this and for people coming to speak yet again. I have a few follow-up thoughts. One, just while it's fresh in my mind, the examples that Deborah gave are both, I don't know where the one that you said was near Inman Square, the Hondar House, is that what you? Prospect Street. A garage, okay. Yeah, both of those examples are on corridors, correct? So that they can support, in theory, greater levels of density So I'm just pointing that out. It would be really helpful also to go through all of the boards around here, because these are familiar and attractive projects, to know how each of them was permitted, whether any of them used the 40B process. I know some of them did, whether they were built on land that came from the city, that belonged to the housing trust, and so forth, because one thing it illustrates to me is that it is possible to build subsidized housing here, and that it can be very attractive. So I don't know if that was the intent of having the posters, but without that information, it just tells me that we've built a lot of very attractive, affordable housing somehow, and that's good. And I think the residents who live in these buildings appreciate it. So, you know, one thing I think is that it's very clear that all of us agree that finding opportunities to preserve and create subsidized housing is a very high priority in the city, and we wouldn't have spent all of this time in meetings trying to think through this project, this problem, if we didn't. But I do want to say that there are other community needs and many interests to balance, and I have to say that I don't think the overlay as it's currently proposed is the best approach to solve this problem, or that it's ready to pass along to the Ordinance Committee and the Planning Board. For one thing, there's still been no report back to my April 1st policy order about understanding better the broader implications, including the financial implications and others. And as a conscientious policymaker and public servant, I don't think I can support something without understanding its full range of impact, and we still haven't heard that. And you know, that was only on April 1st, so I'm not faulting. I asked a lot of questions, and other councilors supported those questions, so I'm not faulting anyone for not having produced an answer in 24 days. I agree with the mayor, it can work. All of the posters around the room show that affordable housing absolutely can work at greater densities than some of the surrounding neighborhood. But my opinion is that this draft doesn't understand how and where higher densities can be accommodated with fewer detrimental impacts to the scale and the architectural form of the neighborhoods, respecting all of their wonderful variety, which many people on both sides have spoken about. We all like the variety and the interest that streets of various scales and sizes and architectural periods provide, and we do not want to lose that. I firmly believe that there are many so-called soft sites throughout the city, including in West Cambridge, including in North Cambridge, including in neighborhoods that do not make the list of having the highest level of affordable housing, where incremental density would actually further our citywide planning goals, those goals in the elusive Envision report, where it would enliven blocks that are a little dead now, reactivate neighborhood retail corridors, and overall produce a more positive public realm. And we could absolutely write zoning that would look at that and have the soft sites naturally fall out of the set of conditions where we said an overlay should apply. It would complement our other community and planning goals. I want to say also that I think this is a market-based approach, and it incentivizes the insertion of higher density buildings throughout the city, but it's not following an overarching plan, and that troubles me. I've learned a bit about form-based zoning from speaking with people who practice it. It's conceived to be use agnostic, and the overlay introduces form-based zoning for a single use, affordable housing, and serves it to us in three sizes: small, medium, and large. It so far ignores the urban design principles that underline the whole form-based approach, which are to create a harmonious public realm. We still have seen no design guidelines that would tell us what the sort of playbook of different forms, and as someone mentioned, that could be up to 25 of them, and they could be given numerical values so that you might have a size 3 building just like you have in shoes, and you might have a size 10 building, and you wouldn't necessarily put them together. but you might put a size 6 building next to a size 3 building. We haven't gotten that granular, and that's what I think many of us need to be able to say, I'm okay with this. And honestly, because this is only going to apply to the limited number of projects that our funding will support, I don't think that we're going to get that level of detailed guidelines because it's not worth the effort. Miami introduced form-based zoning citywide, and it took them 400 meetings. We don't have time and the patience for 400 meetings. So, instead we're being told, and I've said this before, trust us, you'll like what we build, and if you don't, well, producing more units of subsidized housing is more important than anything else the community values or needs. And the process that we're setting up, whether you call it as of right or without binding review, essentially, I think, tells people, you can ask for the other things you want, but the imperative that is driving this is creation of more units. And so at the end of the day, more units is going to win over anything else. And I don't think that's sitting well with a lot of people based on the emails we've received. After the last hearing that we had, when we had so many students, grad students from both Harvard and MIT coming, the question that came to my mind is, where are the universities, the large developers, the major employers? They're the ones that are creating the jobs and the bottomless demand for housing. Why have they remained silent when their affiliates and their employees come and tell us they can't afford to live here? They have land and they have resources, and they have a responsibility to our community that cannot be simply met with a community benefits package in exchange for upzoning. It's a vicious cycle. The more we upzone, the more demand we create. And they need to come to the table and help us with this problem. In the old days, that would have happened. I don't know why we aren't asking more of them. And in terms of the discourse, it's been said, and it is true, that the way that this has been framed is that it's driven people into corners instead of bringing us together. And that's really unfortunate, because we need to be able to talk to each other about this. We need to be able to find common ground and to compromise. This is a need that is stemming from an overheated innovation economy and massive disruptions to our entire system, from technology to automation. Our workforce is changing, and it's really hard for people to make a living these days. We have widened income inequality, and our city is feeling that in a really major way. So I guess I'm still supportive of trying to find common ground and figure out how an overlay type of approach could work under certain conditions, but I don't think that what we've been given gets us there. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Councilor Siddiqui.
Councilor Toomey, I'll yield to you before I speak if you'd like to say anything. Okay. So I see the points that the Vice Mayor is making. I respectively disagree on some of them. I think moving this out of Housing Committee is key, not only because of the points that the Mayor said, but there are other things that this committee would like to work on. We've been waiting to hear back on tenant preferences. I know you guys, the Affordable Housing Trust is ready to talk about that. We have that discussed. We have the preservation of over 500 units at Fresh Pond Apartments underway as well. So the city is doing that as well. There's, this morning at a 9 a.m. meeting on our condo conversion policy that I'm working on with the Tenant Displacement Task Force. There are key things that are happening that I think go together with this. And I think in the Housing Committee level, I think, as the Mayor said, I hope that, by the time any ordinance committee is scheduled, we will have the answers to this policy order. I don't think, as I said in one of the whereas clauses does say before any, before we adopt any zoning overlay, and we are not adopting anything anytime soon, I would not vote for that. So there is, I think, time to get these answers and make sure that there is some kind of common ground. So that's I think moving it out of the committee is moving it forward, but making sure we are answering the questions that people aren't comfortable with and trying to get to a common ground because of the other work that's happening. So that's my comment. My question for CDD would be, a resident emailed this question, and I was thinking about our incentive zoning, I was thinking about our inclusionary zoning and kind of the evaluation component of it. I think with incentive, maybe it's with inclusionary, can't remember, it says every 3 years we'll look at it again, or zoning tends to do that. Could there be a section on that of evaluation period? Is that feasible?
Ms. Farouk?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, absolutely. That is something that could be added if that's the will of the council.
Thank you. That was a question we got. And I think it's important just to know that zoning evolves. You have to evaluate. You have to look at it again and again and see if it's accomplishing goals. So that's my comment. And then I think that's all I'll say for now. But thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Are there any comments, questions? Councilor Mallon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to wholeheartedly second this idea of trying to figure out an evaluation period, or I think it has been something that a lot of residents have brought up, and it's something that I've been thinking about a lot. How do we convey to residents that we will look at this and rework it? As you said, zoning evolves, and it should evolve given different landscapes. And we want to make sure it's doing the thing that we intended to do, and there aren't intended consequences. And I think writing it into zoning is probably the best way to do that. So I just wanted to give you my second there and really put the energy and effort behind that.
Very good.
May I add a follow-on question? So I think that's an evaluation period is good. Could we talk about piloting this, identifying areas where we think we need to try to do some of the things that this would bring, and pilot it rather than, I think a lot of the anxiety that people are feeling is that it is such a blanket approach, and the examples we're seeing don't help us understand why we would do it in three sizes, small, medium, and large, on every parcel everywhere in the city, without trying to start in a few places where we actually want either have land or want to spur development or whatever, and see how it goes. So I think that's, there's other ways to evaluate. You can do it the whole city, or you can start small and then the way we did with composting, and then try to roll it out. So I'm offering that as something to consider. You don't have to answer it now.
Further discussion? Hearing none. What I would want to add, Councilor Jimmy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you everyone for being here this evening. Just to pick up on the word anxiety, that for my constituents, and we heard very eloquently from Councilor Mallon, the Vice Mayor, and all of us who have constituents and friends and even people we don't know that come to us on a daily basis full of anxiety and worry and fear where they're going to be, where are they going to have a place to sleep at night. That's, a reality in the city for all of us that we're hearing. So I'm a member of the Housing Committee, so at some point I will be moving this favorable recommendation from the Housing Committee to the Ordinance Committee for further discussion. But 30 years we've been talking about this, and it's time, and I am hoping that the political will and the residents of the city have realized exactly by our failure, a collective body politically over the years, has got us into this position that we're in right now. And so, I appreciate the word anxiety among people who are afraid of what might be coming, but, for the people who are living through this, families and young kids and immigrants and veterans and elderly, you can't even describe when people come into you with their certain situation and the fear in their eyes, and it's overwhelming. And we just have to, is this going to be the cure-all for everything? I'm not sure, but we cannot continue to delay where we're at because we're losing the soul of the city. And I'm just hoping and praying that we can all collectively come together and make this work to everyone's satisfaction. But to when you have little kids in your office and they're just looking at you, where they're going to be able to stay in the school system with their friends and everything, it is heart-wrenching. So I'm hoping that we can move forward on this and make it work for everybody. And I understand it's not an easy process, but I really do think that we have a great city and great residents who want to keep the city diverse and welcoming to all. So I think we will be able to make this work, and I think we just have to trust one another, and hopefully we can move forward on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Toomey. Councilor Siddiqui.
Back to me again, really quickly. I wanted to also say that I concur with the Vice Mayor's point about our universities, and I'm happy to chair Economic Development and University Relations Committee to talk about this. It is mentioned in Envision, the land banking and the amount of property our universities own. It is crazy, and they, in addition to doing their pilot, can do much more. So I'm happy to work on that with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Dickey. And you make a very good point. It was said earlier, there's no one way, but there are several ways and many ways, and a lot of that you've heard from. There's no doubt in my mind that each member of the Housing Committee and the members that are not members of the committee that have come have all worked in earnest. One of the things, our job is to take in all the information and make the best decision based on the facts, the information, and our working together, knowing that I always say we have to we'll walk away with the unhappy medium, meaning that everyone's not going to get exactly what they want, but we'll be doing something to advance the conversation around housing for all. And I can't help but hear Cheryl Ann in my ear saying housing is a right, and how do we make that right happen for people? A family was just standing up here, a gentleman representing his family was up here just recently, and he made me think about a conversation I often hear from Mike Johnson, often heard from Cheryl Ann, that in this housing pipeline, there are families that want to move on. They want to move out of low mod income housing, but there's no place to go, and they want to stay in Cambridge because this is where their support network is. If there were more available housing for them, they would move on. Lower income families could move in, and you do this sort of upward progression for families. And I believe that's what we all want to do, is how do we engineer, if you will, that opportunity for families. So everything that I've heard this evening has been important, certainly heartfelt, and very important to have as a part of the consideration of what the ordinance committee will do by taking it forward. I think this committee, and I cannot thank my co-chair enough in terms of the amount of hours and hard work that she alone, we together have put in trying to shepherd this item forward. But I feel, and I would concur with the colleagues, that it's time to move it the next step for the ability to have the full panel of city councils be able to weigh in on this discussion, to start to address the need of people that are kind of hanging on with their fingernails, to the whole, the university's more accountable. So there's so much other work that's going to happen, not only in the housing committee, if we could move it on to the ordinance, and what happens in the ordinance committee, but in civic unity, looking at wage equity, because you can't look at housing affordability without taking on the challenge of wage equity, and we are lagging behind in the work that we should be doing. But that is important as well. And so how do we continue those conversations in those small subcommittees, in those small committees of the city council that work to bring the information forward so that when all put together is a working and operational plan. One of the things that has sort of gone to the wayside because of our proper attention to the overlay, is our sort of quarterly meetings with the community-based organizations that build affordable housing, to say what they're doing, the good, the indifferent, where they are. The CHA is doing incredible work, homeowners rehab, just to start. And we have not had a chance to talk about those things because we have appropriately so been on the affordable overlay. The comprehensive housing program, which Cheryl Ann was a major author of, has yet to been realized. These parts have. We did the linkage. We've done the inclusionary. We're now on the affordable overlay. Councilor Siddiqui is working on condo conversion. I apologize. And I know others are in their own way. So there's all this other work that is in the housing committee milieu that we can turn our attention back to. In terms of revise and review, the city council should always have a process whereby anything that's adopted is revised and reviewed. That was a very important part of the inclusionary document. It is a part of the linkage document. It should be a part of the overlay, and every other policy decision that the council makes should always have an opportunity to revise and review. And so it's my hope that the members of the Housing Committee will move this forward to have to continue to have the robust highly citizen engaged conversation around the overlay district. But it is my feeling that the appropriate place for it at this juncture is in the ordinance committee. So they do have an order that was proposed. I hear Council Toomey is offering an order. I sat with the clerk. She gave us language which is as follows. I'd like to just read it to my colleagues, and it reads as follows. Council Simmons, Council Siddiqui, whereas the City Council's Housing Committee has held numerous public hearings in recent months to discuss the proposed citywide affordable housing overlay district, and whereas the members of the Housing Committee have signaled their intentions to further to have further discussions about this proposed affordable housing overlay district take place in the context of the ordinance committee. Now, therefore, it be ordered that the chairs of the ordinance committee, and that could be struck and say the housing committee of the city council, be and hereby request the scheduled hearings that the chairs of the ordinance committee be and hereby are requested to schedule hearings to further review and discuss the attached draft of the proposed citywide affordable housing overlay district as prepared by the Community Development Department. Discussion.
Madam
Mayor?
Yes, thank you. Well, so you would be forwarding the actual attached draft rather than just forwarding the idea, because the attached draft is a draft, and so that would be the starting point, not...
We would be forwarding the language that community development has given us in its, perhaps, with its iterations, because they just put before us today iterations of that attached draft. But that's the zoning language. And we will be taking that zoning language and taking it out of committee and putting it into the ordinance committee.
Okay, and that we still won't have the answer to the policy order that could inform the zoning language. So I would like, I know you want to do this order and take a vote. I would like to be recorded as present with respect to all of the work that has gone into this and the I know that there's a lot of support for it. I also know there's a lot of people who don't feel it's ready to go there. So I would like to be
I
recorded
hear
as
that,
present on that.
and
Thank
I certainly
you.
appreciate your
And I
feelings
don't think
on
it's
it.
going to change the outcome.
But your statement is important to be heard and part of the record. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Further discussion? On the motion, does it need to be roll call or just a voice vote? Pleasure of the committee. On a voice vote, sufficient? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. Further discussion? That you can do. On a motion to adjourn, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. This hearing is adjourned.
Yes, I know you. Yes, yeah, I saw you. I didn't know.
Just send it, just forward it to me.
We can get copy there. We can have it.
Okay.
HP. Yeah. Yeah, probably an HP. Well,
and what is your, so you...
I'm succeeding differently.
I know that's certain point.
No, I live in Dorchester.
Yeah. We'll definitely have a
transitioning. I'm sort of spending a day a week instead of
we'll have our we've been monopolizing our periodic meetings with you guys to talk about this, but we do have meetings where we all get together and talk about Thank you. Very much. I've got so much Bye, Larry.
I can't walk.
Thanks.
I know. Busy week. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carl Kirsch. They succeed following her big, trying to fill her big shoes. So we'll look forward to working with her. Yes, we'll do that. She's,
We're going to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is Noah Sawyer, who's going to be our Housing Development Director.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you? Denise? Yes, Carl Kirsch.
Hey, Judy.
That was great.
Sucks about Cheryl Ann.
I knew she was really it, but I'm still really shocked. Because